12 o'clock, so it's time to start our meeting. As always, we're going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ken, could I get you to lead us in the pledge?
Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. All right, and then Harold Hembry, my uncle-in-law, 93-year-old uncle-in-law, and he's been a pastor his whole life, and I'm going to ask him to lead us in a prayer.
Mindful, our Father, that you are the giver, sustainer, and receiver of life. We pause to give thanks for the life of each one here this day. We thank you for the occasion that brings us together, and we ask your blessings upon us. Enrich our understanding, enhance our determination for the preservation of the freedom and the opportunities that we enjoy in this land. Use us always in your service, and forgive our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you, Harold. Okay, let's see. I've got a few introductions to make. One, Stephen Phipps, back in the corner there. Couldn't do this without Stephen. He handles all the audiovisual. Yeah, give him a hand. And he's the one that brought this venue and dropped it right in my lap. I didn't have to make one call to find a venue because he called me. Thank you very much, Stephen. We are also, as we saw when we did our pledge, Ken Luttrell, District 37, right? Our House of Representatives. You been busy?
Plenty busy.
I heard there was a record number of bills introduced this year.
3,000.
Wow.
You got to be able to get through those in a couple of days, right? Yeah. Just reading it to take you till Christmas to read all of them, wouldn't it?
We'll get the bad stuff killed.
Well, I've been told the system is in place not to pass bills, it's in place to kill bills.
Right.
That right? Yeah.
Correct.
Well, appreciate you coming, Ken. Thank you very much. Also, Shannon, stand up. Folks, this is Shannon Leatherman. He is one of the candidates for the Kay County Commission District 3. We're going to have a candidate forum for all three candidates. They've all three confirmed in Tonkawa at the Church of Christ, 300 North Public. That's right across from the parking lot for the football stadium in Tonkawa. And that's going to be on the 30th of March at 7 p.m. So I encourage everyone that's interested in who's running our county to attend that forum. And I'll have everybody in here has got my phone number, I hope. If you got any questions about the dates or anything, call me. Also, Lorena Smithheiser, she's the chair of the Noble County GOP. I appreciate you driving up today. Thank you for coming.
Is anybody else from Noble County here? Well, you sometimes bring in some, but...
Yeah. And look how nice, she actually sitting next to Melvin. She needs a hand for that, folks.
We have kids the same age.
There you go. Okay, I want to remind everybody, March 7th, it's a Tuesday, obviously. That's the day we're going to vote on 820. And 820, somebody said the other day, why didn't they call it 420? That's the bill for recreational marijuana. And so I just want to remind everybody, if you care about that either way, you need to get out and vote. And April 4th is when we're going to have the vote for the school boards will be voted on then, and also the District 3. This seat, this is a special election for District 3. Those of you who remember Joe Albaugh, He ran and won, actually won handily. I think he got 52% of the vote with a 4-person field. He got injured in an accident on his farm, and his health does not permit him to serve, so he had to resign. That's why we're having a special election to fill that seat. But that's on April 4th, so put both of those in your book. Doug, there you are. Come on up. Everyone, this is Doug Brown, and Doug is the head of the Cherokee Strip Quail and Pheasants Forever. Am I correct that that's similar to the kind of work Ducks Unlimited does for ducks?
Yes, for habitat and
Yeah.
getting people involved, young groups and women. We started this, we're getting ready to have our ninth annual banquet next Saturday at Blackwell at the Event Center, and we usually have well over 200 people, close to 300 a couple times. And we've helped sponsor Tonkwall and Ponk City FFA new shooting teams within the last 4 years, and we've bought some guns for. We just bought 4 guns for Newkirk FFA shooting team, and we bought a couple guns for Blackwell, and we helped get the new team started up until some parents can feel comfortable to help take over. And then we put on a ladies event once or twice a year. We call it Buffalo Gals. And last couple of years we've taken them quail hunting out at Big Fork Ranch. And then we had a yearly youth day, and we've done it at Big Fork Ranch last 6 or 7 years. And we usually have anywhere from 60 to 80 kids at that deal. And it's an all-day deal. We take them fishing, we have skeet shooting, we have bow and arrow target shooting, BB guns for the little ones, and we furnish them lunch, and we'll have a drawing for a gun, and then habitat-wise, we've planted some habitat around. I don't know if you've noticed our sign over on I-35. It's on our home place. We've planted a little pollinator plot there, and we've done several around. And we also help out Cali County 4-H. They had a member when we first started up that really helped us get started, and their Quail Forever, Pheasants Forever ceased, so they've been involved. And this year we'll have K County 4-H and Cali County 4-H help us at our banquet. They'll help us run our games, and they'll sell our raffle tickets, and we usually give them several $100s for helping us there at that deal. So anyway, we're involved in the county, and here's you've probably seen them around Tonkwall and Blackwell and Ponk City, the posters, the flyers. For you just take your phone and do the QR code, and
why don't you lay that on that back table?
Okay.
Where I have all of the forms. Anybody that
and you
wants
get your
to
tickets or sponsorships or whatever with this.
take a picture of it on the table back there, and that way you'll have it on your phone.
Yep.
Doug, thanks a lot. Thanks
Been
for-
involved since startup, and been the president for the last 3 years.
How long have y'all been in existence?
Well, this will be our 9th annual. So
Oh, okay.
14 started organized in 2014.
Great. Thanks for everything you do. It sounds like y'all are pretty productive. Thank you very much. We're also graced with the presence of Gary Miles. He's the BFW commander, Post 1201. Yeah. And he's got a couple things he wants to talk to you about. Come on up.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to give you some information that kind of give you an update on what's happening with the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. I used to be a commissioner there until the governor decided that 6 of us needed to be off that commission. We were told to fire Joel Steagall, who you've all met, or we will be fired. We did not fire him, so we're gone. And Jay is on his way, right?
Oh, yeah, Jake, he's en route. I talked to him about an hour ago and he was at Guthrie, so he should be here anytime.
I'm going to
I
save.
told him we had housekeeping stuff to get out of the
Okay.
way, so not to rush.
I'm going to save some comments. Hopefully Jay will show up because Jay is one of the authors of a bill this year that's going to very, very much help veterans. And hopefully my good buddy Ken will pass on that one and not try to kill it. I think he's aware of it. But I'm going to if Jay gets here, I'm going to give you some background on what's going on down there because I'd like for him to be here to either confirm or deny what I'm telling you. But what I'm telling you is facts. I don't care what you've read in the newspaper about the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs and the executive director, Joel Kinsel, and his inability to perform. I can tell you right now that as we speak, everything that was being done before is still being done for veterans. I've got to commend the staff down there. They put their heads down, they don't get into politics, and they move forward helping veterans. How many of you are veterans in here? 2. Well, I'm going to tell you a few things real quickly, and I'm not going to get into details because if you're not a veteran, it may not mean that much to you, but it means something to all of us because we're all affiliated with a veteran somewhere, and a family member, a friend. The Oklahoma staff is still working at 100%. We're right now #1 in the nation for per capita benefits for a disabled vet. How was the last time you saw Oklahoma City or Oklahoma be #1 if it didn't involve meth or teen pregnancies? I mean, no offense, Ken. But we are #1 in the nation. Our veterans' homes, there's 7 of them. To give you a comparison, Texas has 9, Oklahoma has 7. If you're 70% disabled, you go to one of those veterans' homes at no charge. And you don't have to be broke to do it. Your spouse can keep your assets and you can just move in. We have multiple legislative bills that have been passed to improve the quality of life for veterans. And again, thank you, Ken, for helping with some of those. We are partnering with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for the PACT Act, which is, again, a wonderful opportunity for veterans. This month will be the Women's Veterans Symposium, and OK STEP will kick off within the next 30 days, which is specific transition education programs. That, along with another one called Boots to Business, which was instigated by the ODVA, helps young veterans when they separate from the service to get back into the private sector with support as education, job placement, anything that needs to be done to help them get back to where they can be productive citizens, because there is quite a transition from military to civilian life. The suicide prevention program, everybody seems to have one now, but quite frankly, they're not as effective as they should be. And unfortunately, we lose a lot of veterans every day to suicide. 70% of them from the Guard and or from the military are done with firearms. I know that's a topic that's very sensitive with you and with all of us, and obviously we don't want to lose our right to bear arms, but how do we figure out a way to keep these veterans from having quick access to their own firearms, or how do we find out ahead of time that we have a situation that needs to be dealt with? Because obviously pulling out a gun and making that decision doesn't give you a lot of time to think about what you're getting ready to do. And I don't know that there's a solution, but the ODVA is looking at this as a veteran's life and wellness situation to try to find a way to positively interact prior to the tragedy so that we can keep these veterans who spent years supporting and risking their life for our country to all of a sudden lose their life to their own actions. It's very pathetic. And this may not be the way to do it. This may not work, but at least it's trying something different because nothing else seems to be working. You can't go on the newspaper or TV without seeing somebody that's trying to address this issue, and the VFW is as well, but quite frankly, it's not working. I will get into a little bit about the ODVA. Like I said earlier, when Joel Kinsel ran for governor, the reason he did it was because the governor approached him and suggested privatizing the veterans' homes in the state. That would mean that they would be like all other homes where Medicare would step in, and when you were found to be indigent and had no money and had no visible means of support, then Medicare would take care of you in a veterans home. That meant you had to get rid of all your assets. Your wife had to be broke as well. The way the ODVA works it is if you walk in and you're 70% disabled, you walk in the door, you sign the papers, and you're accepted, and we take care of you, our veterans. They're beautiful homes, wonderful staff. If you're not 70%, they will look at your income, they will look at your percent of disability, and there's a sliding scale, but it's still much cheaper than going to a private entity. What happened was Joel said, there's no way we're going to do that. And the governor said, quite frankly, it threatened Joel. Joel ran against him in the primary and lost. It was a quick, ill-prepared situation, I'm sorry to say, but he had the veterans at heart because he was not going to let those homes go into private entities. After Joel ran, the head of the commission was told that Joel needed to go, and the governor cannot fire him. Only the commission can fire him. The remark made was, fire Joel or we'll fire you. We did not fire Joel, and now 6 of us that represent the veteran service organizations in the state have been terminated. We've been replaced with people who do not represent our veterans organizations. They are strictly serve at the pleasure of the governor, and they were appointed by him with no input from the veteran service organizations. For example, the person that represents the Oklahoma Department of the Veterans of Foreign Wars right now, who nominated me, who I answer to on any decision made by the ODVA, that person has never been a member of the VFW. The person that represents the Military Order of the Purple Heart is not a member of that organization. The DAV and the Paralyzed Veterans of America lost their representation. They have not been replaced, so they have no voice. What that means is the people that represent the veterans of Oklahoma are not veterans of Oklahoma themselves, or they are veterans who do not represent the people who the law says should nominate them. If a person that represents the VFW is not even a member, how does he represent the 14,000 VFW members in the state? It makes no sense. The way to get around this, and when Jay gets here, I'm sure he'll talk about it, is House Bill 1080. House Bill 1080 would take the governor's power to nominate 9 members to that commission and reduce it to 2. Instead of him being able to pack that commission with his cronies who are dead set on privatizing these homes, he would only have 2 nominations or 2 appointments to the commission. The other 7 would be spread across government officials, the Attorney General, Speaker of the House, President Pro Tem of the Senate, so that there would be a more diverse group, and also the law would be upheld, and that each one of those positions would have to be filled by an individual nominated by their veteran service organization. What that means is when the VFW position comes forward, the state commander of the VFW would offer 5 names. Those would be sent up to the Attorney General. The Attorney General would then pick one of those names to represent the VFW. And at that point in time, the Senate would approve that person or not approve them. That's how it happened when we were all appointed. We had to provide our military service records, showing that we had honorable discharge, that we had served our country, that we were eligibly a VFW member. Right now, the head of the military affairs, Secretary of Military Affairs, claims to have a top secret DD-214. There is no such thing. I can tell you right now. Greetings, sir.
There's the man.
I'll stop talking about you. Bottom line, I'm not going to take a lot of time that I should be giving to Representative Steagall, but I'm going to, as I'm sitting here and there's only 2 veterans in the room, I realize that a lot of this doesn't mean a lot to all of you. But somewhere down the line, it does. I don't care if you're aggravated with the Tourism Commission, the way the health department's being dealt with, the way the education department's being dealt with. It makes no difference. The veterans are the same way. This is supposed to be about representation, not tyranny. Tulsa World today had an article, and in that article, talking about the committee chairs, cabinet members in Oklahoma, and this is a direct quote from Governor Stitt. "If I ever think somebody's not aligned with my vision, I am going to remove them from my cabinet," which means you do it my way or it's a highway, and that's what's happened so far. And I'll give you one other analogy. I was watching a video the other night of on Animal Planet or something, and there was a herd of wildebeests. One of them was off to the side, and a lion had him by the nose and was trying to choke him down. And while that wildebeest was about to lose his life, here sits a whole herd of wildebeest with long horns watching. Any one of them could have walked over and stuck a horn up that lion's rear end and saved his fellow wildebeest, and they could have all left healthy. Instead, they stood around and watched somebody else take the heat and lose their life. And you got to wonder, is it because they didn't influence them because they weren't affected by it, or just because they're too dumb to realize that when one of you goes down, if you don't stick together, you're all going to go down. That being said, I'm going to turn this over because I know that you'd much rather hear Jay Steagall, but I can tell you right now that Jay is probably going to introduce or talk to you about House Bill 1080. He's better at it than I am. But one thing I've learned about being down there on the at the Capitol over the last few months, which I never wanted to be, I didn't go looking for politics. Politics came looking for me. But I can tell you that you don't have to be a patriot to be a politician. But the man you're getting ready to listen from is not only a patriot, he's got his heart is in veterans. I've been very, very fortunate to become a friend of his, and if all the people like in Oklahoma City that were running our business would have the compassion and the heart that Ken and Jay does, we'd be in a heck of a lot better shape. But I really appreciate everything that you do for us, and I appreciate everything that Jay Steagall does to help veterans and to help Oklahoma citizens. Thank you very much. Thank you,
A couple of things here. Gary mentioned about the high suicide rate with veterans. I'm not a veteran, but I fully support this operation. They've got, from what I've heard, this is the best setup for disabled veterans anywhere in the country, and it's here in poor old Oklahoma. We're kind of at the bottom of the economic ladder, but they take care of our veterans here. It's important. One thing about the suicide rate we have to be careful of. The left, for several years, has been trying to get laws passed to prohibit veterans that have been treated for PTSD from buying a firearm. And that is something that is absolutely unacceptable. These people carried a rifle in defense of all of us and our freedoms. And when they get home, if they want to own a gun, that's their business. The government should be out of it. But we got to be careful. Anytime you want the government to get involved with anything with guns, they always try and take it too far. Also, he mentioned Joel. Joel spoke briefly at one of the meetings here last year, and I've met and talked with him a couple of times since then. Great guy. And he had not even a whole shoestring campaign going, and he came in second. He beat out somebody who was campaigning hard for 10 months or a year beforehand. So just a little bit of campaigning that he did, he still came in second. Again, as we all know, Stitt swept it, but I was pleased that he made that good of a showing for no more campaign than he had going. One thing before we get on with the main part of the program, Caps, For now, for the first time ever, you can buy an OK2A cap online. Go to OK2A.org, and the banner's right there. You don't even have to scroll down to find it. The hats are only going to be on sale through this week, till Friday. So if you or anybody you know wants a cap, now is the time to order it. I've got 6 different colors. I've got a khaki. I've got an olive drab, which is selling really well, kind of a military look, I guess. And I've got 2 OSU caps. I've got orange on black and black on orange. I only have 1 OU cap. It's crimson with white. And we've got a hot pink for any ladies or transgenders that might be members, I guess. Whatever. Anyway, OK2A.org. And again, everybody's got my phone number. If you don't, grab a card from me before you leave. If you got any questions about it, give me a call. They're good quality hats. And yeah, Melvin.
Can you buy them through PTSD?
Yes. You can qualify to buy a cap, even if you have PTSD, and even if you're Melvin. What will we do that, Melvin? You're my comedy relief at every meeting. I love it.
Wait till you let me speak.
I know better than that. You get plenty of clock time just asking questions. Anyway, blessed to have you here. I appreciate you coming. Okay, let's see. Let me make sure I got everything else out of the way. Yes. Oh, hey, thanks. There's the caps, folks. Okay, and before we get to Jay's talk, I've got a very short, it's about 2.5 minute video that was cut Thursday by Don Spencer. Anybody in here know who Don Spencer is? And John Tidwell. John Tidwell is the overall boss of the state for the Americans for Prosperity group. Many of you, Michael Morrison has been to several of my meetings, and he's the guy right above Michael Morrison. Anyway, OK2A and AFP and also Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs have kind of pitched in together to back their 2 bills, 2 House bills, 1395 and House Bill 2775. And they've cleared committee, correct?
We cleared the floor of the House.
They've cleared the floor. So they're on the way to, they're at the Senate now. Oh, okay. These are school choice bills, folks. And the video's a real short video. We'll do that. And then we will get to Jay's program. Go ahead and run the video.
Hey everybody, it's John Tidwell, State Director of Americans for Prosperity here in Oklahoma. I am joined by Don Spencer, who runs OK2A here in Oklahoma. Don is a good friend and a good ally in a lot of these liberty fights that we get into in the Capitol, and appreciate you being here today.
You bet,
Don.
I appreciate it too.
You're here to talk with us about House Bill 1935 and the companion House Bill 2775 in the legislature. House Bill 1935, as a reminder for everybody, it's a bill by Speaker McCall and Senator Julie Daniels in the Senate. Provides a $5,000 tax credit per child for private school tuition, or a $2,500 per child homeschool tax credit. And then there's various things that can cover: materials testing. One key is the curriculum side for the homeschoolers. I think there's some really great curriculum opportunities out there, and provides for $2,500, which I think is a big bonus there. And then on the private school side for tuition, but it's more than tuition. There's programs, tutoring, etc., some occupational therapy issues that can be handled with that money as well. So really great opportunities. What's your take on this?
My take on this is that it's a great opportunity because your closest control to what's going on at your local school first is your vote for your school board member. Yep. The second portion is money, and parents can control and get more control by using these tax credits to make sure that they get the proper education that they desire for their kids, whether it be public education or private school, or like my wife and I chose to do, 3 homeschool kids.
Yep.
So we look at this as a very positive step forward, and I encourage people to continue to look at this and watch this and support it with their legislators.
The bill passed this week out of the House. I think it was 75 to 25, so really strong showing in the House. Obviously, it's going to head to the Senate. They've had a few school choice bills that they've heard over the last several years, gotten a lot of support for. So I think that if we remind everybody, if they can go to our Action Center, there's two ways you can do that. You can go to oklaed.org, 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 or if you get your phone out, and we'll put a link in the description here, but you can use that QR code as well. Everybody's using QR codes these days.
Absolutely.
So it's a pretty handy way to do it. But Don, I appreciate you being here.
Hey, in the name of liberty, let's get this done.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Stay tuned, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, this is the first time that Don's come out in support of one of these school choice bills. So this is a pretty big step. I'm going to address the elephant in the room because the objection I hear all the time about school choice bills is government money has government strings attached. Have you getting any feedback from your folks?
Not on this.
Okay. Jay, have you had any? Okay. I'm getting a lot of this in the rural, especially western Oklahoma. I'm hearing a lot of this. I've been assured by people that I trust that this bill is structured so that cannot happen. Would you all agree with that?
This puts the control over how those funds are spent with your local school board,
Okay.
not us.
Okay, yeah, good. Well, like I said, that's the elephant in the room. I want to go ahead and address it. Folks, we've got to do something. And these are tax credits, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. I like that better than writing a check.
This does not take one penny away from the funding that already goes to public education. Some of this money will go through the formula to provide the teacher pay raises. Every teacher in the state of Oklahoma will receive a minimum of a $2,500 pay raise.
Good. Well, this was one of the big things they were blasting Brian Walters on when he was running, is because he was a strong supporter of this. Big flash, folks. The other side lies. If they make a public announcement, a public statement, issue a press release, I'll tell you right now, every bit of it is a lie, 100%. So keep that in mind, because there's going to be a lot of publicity about these bills. All right, now, for those that might be interested, I've only got a few of these. They're on the back table. These are put out by Americans for Prosperity, and it's got the QR code on it directly. So if you wouldn't mind, just snap pictures. It's two-sided, or if you want, you can just key in the QR code and you'll be ready to go. Okay, any questions before we turn the floor over to Jay? They're wanting to hear you, Jay. Folks, Jay Steagall is chair of the State Powers Committee, which he changed the name from State Rights Committee because he told me, and it made perfect sense as soon as he said it, states don't have rights, states have powers. Us, citizens, are the ones with the rights. So it's a semantic deal, but I think it's really important because now every time they mention that committee, it's State Powers Committee. 22-year Air Force veteran. You got A++ OK2A grade. He's been one of our absolute stalwart liberty warriors at the Capitol. And I appreciate him driving up here from Yukon, where he lives, to speak with us. Jay, you got it, buddy. Let's give him a hand, folks.
Thanks for having me back, and I'm gonna need just a second here to get this thing plugged in and ready to go. But let me tell you, it's good to be amongst friends. It's been a pretty challenging week, hasn't it?
It was, I tell you.
It seems like time is flying at the Capitol. We're trying to work as fast and efficient as we can. Unfortunately, sometimes I'd like for us to slow down a bit. I'm not much of a marathon runner. Matter of fact, I don't like running at all, but that's what it feels like. It's one sprint after another over a long distance. But, I think this is the first time where I've actually brought an AR with me to this meeting. and I've got it laid up here with me for a reason. We're in a fight, aren't we? I mean, not you and me. We're not fighting with each other. We're on the same team here. But it's our liberties that are at stake. And we have to make our position known. Where do we stand on things? So, you know, I don't go anywhere without my firearms. But most importantly, I don't go anywhere without an understanding of what it is that our constitutional provisions actually give us to begin with. So we have to be armed, not just physically, but mentally as well. We need to be prepared to answer the questions of what do we do now? I think I've given this presentation here before, but I talked to Terry and we both decided we need to recap this. We're going to run through this today, maybe a little quicker than we did last time, but we're going to reemphasize the key takeaways at the end, because you need to talk to your friends about what this material is, and I want you to be as well armed as possible so that these conversations can happen and that the truths are reemphasized, and no matter who you're having this conversation with. Does anybody remember this? The proper role? Okay. Good. Then we don't have to spend 2 hours going through it. We can spend just an hour and a half. Okay, this is me. There's the new committees that I sit on, of course, military or Veterans and Military Affairs. I'm on General Government this year, and the A and B subcommittee for General Government. The first year I was elected, it's not changed. It's about the only thing that hasn't changed. There's my military history. You guys probably remember all of that. And there's the sexy KC-135 Strato tanker that I used to fly. If you guys remember, I like telling people that I used to pass gas and refuel other airplanes. I think this is one of our customers up over northeastern Afghanistan. It was before all the snow fell. I mean, even Luke Skywalker needs fuel before he makes his bomb run on the Death Star. Right. Okay. The story about the Matrix. If you remember the movie, Morpheus is having this conversation in the first movie with Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, and he's holding out these two pills, a red one and a blue one, and Morpheus says to him, "Hey, this is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes." In other words, you take this blue pill, and you'll be plugged back into the system that's going to maintain your life, give you everything you need from cradle to grave. You're going to be dependent on that system, though. That's the cost. We take this red pill, and I'll show you what the truth is. And I doubt that Hollywood intended for this to be as political as we're making it out to be, but how ironic is it in today's world, in this country, right? Where we have one side that's fighting to become more and more dependent on the system, and we have our side, which is trying to get away from that dependency, live our own lives, exercise our own liberties. So, here's what we're going to keep in mind today. The dictatorial tendencies of government cannot be reconciled with any tenet of free society. It is for this reason that we must underscore the importance of limited government, not only in magnitude, but especially in the delegation of power and the exercise thereof. So usually when we talk about a limited government, we think of it from the perspective of we just need fewer people on the payroll. Well, that's not all of it. We also need to make sure that the powers that we've delegated to them are restricted, limited. not only in the powers that we give them, but to what extent they are authorized to utilize them. How many of you know that there's a preamble to the Bill of Rights? In that preamble, we find out exactly why the Bill of Rights exists to begin with. And it is to place additional declaratory and restrictive clauses in the Constitution so that its powers are not misconstructed. There is nothing in that preamble that suggests that the Bill of Rights is the source of your rights. Nothing. We're going to come back to that here in a little bit. Okay, here's all 8 parts. The plan is to come back and go through these sequentially. We'll do that on whatever kind of timing you guys want to go through them. If you remember, we talked about the individual, the institution, and the interaction between those two parties. The individual, we, the people, are the source by which government operates. We're that source of power. Every individual's rights and your powers as well exist outside of any form of government. They exist outside of any constitution. The institution itself is created of, for, and by the people. We recognize that. It may only legally act within the confines of the delegated powers that we turn. Then there's this interaction. There's the delegation process itself that happens through consent. And then government can really only act as an agent of the people. There's this collective right process that we'll talk about here in just a bit too, to show how all that's connected. The individual. George Washington said the power under the Constitution will always be in the people. He doesn't say the power under the Constitution will be in the Bill of Rights. He doesn't say the power of the Constitution will be in the Constitution itself. The Constitution is a document. That's it. It is literally just a document. It is an agreement between the states to form a union, but the document itself has no power. It is simply a document. People have the power. On the individual, in the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, we find the language that Thomas Jefferson utilizes. It says, when in the course of human events, right, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. What is he saying here? This is the first time we see in Thomas Jefferson's writing that everybody's going to sign on to, where he's referring to our Creator giving us our rights and our powers, specifically our powers here. And if we read into what he's saying here, your powers are the same as mine. They're the same as yours. Same as yours, same as yours. They have the same powers. Matter of fact, it's not limited to Americans either. The very next clause in the Declaration of Independence is the most widely used phrase out of the entire document, and one that we find being utilized in every civil liberties case in our country's history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So a lot on the individual. Again, we're re-emphasizing that our Creator gives us our individual rights. Previous paragraph, we learned that it is our powers that also come from God. So what does the word certain mean here? Anybody remember from last time? Let me put it another way. What were we taught in school that meant?
For sure.
That's what it means.
Like an exact enumerated list.
Yeah, there was somehow this certain list of rights that existed, right? That's what we were taught. But that's not what certain means in this context at all. We heard for sure. Okay, so assured rights. It's defined as known for sure, right? Established beyond doubt. Some of the synonyms are undeniable, irrefutable, indisputable, obvious,
Guaranteed.
sure, guaranteed. My favorite, sovereign. We're given our sovereign rights. Okay? What about unalienable? What does that mean? Inseparable, okay. So there's usually two sides of this coin. You're not wrong. Let's talk about the two sides here. Can't be taken from you, and you can't give it up. Okay? You're right. I like to break it down a little bit more. They're inseparable, okay? Nobody can take them from you, and you can't give them up. So here's a parallel. How many of you know what your spiritual gift is from God? Okay? You ever think about it in this context? If you know what your spiritual gift is, can you go back to God and say, hey, this isn't really the one I want. Can you give me something else? Of course not. He gave that to you for a specific purpose. And you utilize it, if you're obedient, for the purpose of promoting his kingdom. Does God give you an evil spiritual gift? No. Can he? No. No. There's nothing that God can give you that is unrighteous. Right? This is why we have Christ, to bridge the gap between the righteous and the unrighteous, right? This is how we get there. But God cannot give us anything for which we could ever use in obedience for the purposes of evil. Okay? Very, very important for us to understand that concept, because we're going to talk about this more in relation to our rights and our powers. But the certain unalienable rights that we have from God are sovereign. And since they're inseparable, let's use another synonym here, either absolute or non-negotiable. Endowed by their Creator with sovereign, non-negotiable rights. What God gives me is not up for debate. Ask me what I think about the latest ATF's ruling. Not up for discussion. That's the position we have to take. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Don't go out and hurt these ATF agents. We only act in self-defense. Understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Frederick Bastiat wrote this essay back in 1850, right before he passed, called The Law. He was a French economist. I'm going to pass this around. If you guys didn't take a look at it, you can buy this on Amazon. We talked about this, didn't we? For $3.50 or something like that. Anyway, he has a very linear process in this essay of connecting all the dots for us. And we're going to run through some of that today. He was a French economist. He saw the onset of socialism coming into France and wanted to warn his countrymen about it. Now, of course, this happened some 75 years after the Declaration of Independence, right? But the point is, what he gives us in this essay was true even 75 years prior to the writing. It's the process and the understanding of what law is designed to do. So he starts off by defining man itself. He says life, faculties, and production. In other words, individuality, liberty, and property. This is man. So we often find life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness interchanged with life, liberty, and property in some of our founding documents. So the thought process is consistent with what we've seen in our country. And he said, in spite of the cunning of artful political leaders, these three gifts from God precede all human legislation and are superior to it. Right? Makes sense? Anything that God gives us is superior to anything that man can give us, including legislation. It said life, liberty, and property do not exist because man made law. On the contrary, it's the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place. Well, that's true. So we have these things. Collectively, we need to do something to protect them. But first, we need to lay some ground rules. Each of us, every individual, has a natural right from God to defend his person's liberty and his property. I have the right to self-defense. That is a gift from God. I can also utilize force, which is also another gift from God. By the way, powers and rights are different, but they're connected by one mechanism, and that's force. Okay? Make sense? The Declaration of Independence, it opens up by defining how we have our powers. The next sentence is, where do we get our rights? Same source. So it makes sense to connect these two. We need a mechanism that is also a gift from God, and that's force itself. So we have these gifts. So he goes on to say, well, if every person has the right to defend, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, then it follows that a group of men have the right to organize and support a common force to protect his rights constantly. So what is he talking about? He's talking about government, right? We have the right to organize ourselves and develop our own system of government. It could be something small, it could be something big. But we have the power, the rights, and the force to organize our own system of government. Thomas Paine said this in Common Sense, which I have a copy of as well. You guys probably remember we had to read this at one point as well. And I call him the original T-Pain. Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary. I don't want anybody to think that government is designed to be evil. That's not what Thomas Paine is saying here. He's saying because man is involved, there's evil tendencies of government. But like in the opening paragraph that I read in one of my quotes, the dictatorial tendencies of government. Okay. We have this tendency to utilize government to take from one to give to another. That is an act of evil. So, another quote from my personal favorites, they represent, even though I do have other favorites in the house. Powers nor rights are birthed from any constitution. To suggest otherwise would assert the notion that the purpose of the institution of government is to promulgate and enumerate, delegate and regulate rights at its own pleasure. In other words, if our rights don't come from God, then there's only one other alternative where they could come from, and that would be government itself. Does government give us our rights?
I don't think so.
Right? We have a group that believes that they do. We were taught that they were. We were taught that our rights came from government. When we learned initially about the Bill of Rights in school, we were taught that there's a certain list that gives me all of my rights. Well, that's inconsistent with what we find in the Declaration of Independence. It's counter to what we even find in what we call the preamble to the Constitution. We really just need to call it the Constitution itself, because most of the articles are just a bunch of administrative gobbledygook. The preamble is where we find the marching orders that the people gave their system of government. The government doesn't give us rights. We're in a church building today. Does my right to worship come from government? No. Did we worship prior to the ratification of the Constitution? What about freedom of speech? Did we exercise that in this country before we had a Constitution? What about the ownership of firearms? Did we exercise that before the ratification of the Constitution? Yeah, we shot a bunch of dudes. A whole bunch of them. Yeah, of course. And everybody was using military grade weapons, by the way. That was all that they had. Those poor people had to use military grade weapons. I know. Made by the cheapest bidder. Okay, if every person has the right to defend, even by force, his person's liberty, his property, we went over this, and it follows in a group of men. So now we're talking about this organization of the institution. They have the right to organize and support a common force to protect these rights constantly. So we're going to use a force, right, to defend our rights and our powers. This is the principle of collective right. Its reason for existence, lawfulness, is based on an individual right. So what he goes on to say here is, the rights that we delegate to government are based on the rights that we have. And the rights and powers that we delegate to government are to serve that purpose and that purpose only. When we delegate a power to government, it has restrictions on it, and it can only be used for that purpose. If there's a derivation of any powers not specifically listed in that particular delegation, the government doesn't have it. You can find that restriction in the 10th Amendment as well, but it only makes sense. That's the logical conclusion here. Okay, so the next sentence in the Declaration of Independence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So we see here that government is actually an institution. Well, we knew that prior to the writing of the Declaration of Independence, but we find some other really cool language in here, like the word just, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. What does just mean here? Anybody ever thought about that? Does anybody remember from last time? Did we go into it last time? Righteous. Righteous, okay. It is righteous power, okay, by the way. When we boil it all the way down, it is righteous power. Lawful. Lawful, okay. What Thomas Jefferson meant by the use of the word just here was faithful to the original. Faithful to the original. So we got to think about who had the original power. Who was it? It was God. Right? God gave us powers. The powers that he gave us were for the purpose of good. We're going to delegate some of that over to government to act as our agent, right? So the powers that they utilize have to be consistent with the original purpose of those powers to begin with. Faithful to the original. And the government derives those powers by consent of those that are governed. They can't take those powers. The taking of a power is an evil act itself. We didn't take power from God. The way that it was given to us was from him. The flow of powers only works in one direction. We'll talk about that here in just a bit. Oh, here's the preamble to the Constitution. Everybody remember memorizing this? I wish they would have wrote it out like this for us to go through. It's much easier to understand when we write it out in bullet form. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, are going to do all of these things. We're going to do all of these things by establishing this Constitution. So there's two bullets in here that are kind of my favorites. The first is the establishment of justice. And what does that mean? It means this. It means the unbiased recognition of the equal rights of every individual. Unbiased recognition of the equal rights of every individual. Does not mean we're going to establish a court system so we can figure out who to take from, or what to take from who, right? Now, we did establish a court system, but that's not what this is. This is the protection of our rights, and we can't do that if we don't recognize that all of our rights were given to us by the same Creator, and we were given all the same rights and powers. That's the establishment of justice. My last favorite, though, or my second favorite, is and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So Representative Luttrell and I have been dealing with all kinds of these economic relief packages that we get out of D.C. The one that's getting a lot of attention right now is the GEAR funds. So the governor got a lot of money to spend on education and you know, for the COVID conundrum, whatever you want to call it, the pandemic. And the feds didn't agree with the way that the money was spent, so they want a lot of it back, which is really interesting. They gave us fake money, and now they want real money back.
Is that money laundering?
And that's not a lot. Okay? But here's the problem. Here's the first problem that we have. One, by printing this money, we put our kids in debt. Okay? All the debt that the feds take on is encumbering future generations into this debt. How in the world did you reconcile that with this mandate of securing blessing of liberty, not only for ourselves, but for our kids? How do you do that? It's an act of evil, that's it. They're acting outside of their lane. We didn't borrow this money, friends. We printed it as a system of government. James Madison says this about government. He says, the diversity in the faculties of men, which we talked about earlier, from which the rights of property originate, is not less an insuperable obstacle to uniformity of interests. I said, Jimmy, you're going to have to use small words, big print, and lots of pictures. I'm a pilot, right? So I had to go look all this up. I'm like, what is he talking about? Let me boil it down for you. What he's saying here is, you get enough knuckleheads together down at, say, 23rd and Lincoln, that'll vote to take away your property, which includes your income. They'll do it in the name of a specific cause that they want to support, and they'll use the law to justify it. They'll figure out a way to do it. They will steal from you. DC has been doing this forever. Right. Our state's been doing it since 1907. Property taxes are in our state constitution. Did you know that? The Constitution is just a document. So he goes on and it says, the protection of these faculties is the first object of government. Well, no kidding. The guy that actually wrote the Constitution says the first thing we have to do is recognize the unbiased recognition of every individual's rights, equal rights. No kidding. He probably knew what he was talking about, right? I mean, he only wrote it. No big deal. So here's the flow of powers. God gives powers to the people. So in our system of government, they're at the top. They delegate some of their powers to the state, who then, through our U.S. Constitution, delegates some power to the federal government. The flow of powers only works one direction. The feds do not give the state powers. The state does not give the people powers. It does not work that way. These two do not inherently have rights or powers. So there's nothing for them to give. They're an instrument. They're the employee. They're the deputy in this situation. The people are the principal. If they can't give us powers, they can't give us rights. And they can't force us to utilize them. Makes sense, right? So Bastiat goes on, he says, since no individual acting separately, acting by themselves, can lawfully use force to destroy the rights of others, think of destroying the property of others or taking the property of others. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, right? All these things that we know. Then does it not logically follow that the same principle also applies to the common force, to their system of government? That is nothing more than the organized combination of the individual forces. Well, yeah, can we delegate something that we don't have? Of course not. That's what he's saying. He says, well, then, if this is true, nothing can be more evident than this. The laws of organization of the natural right of lawful defense, it is a substitution of a common force for individual forces. That's what our system of government is. We've delegated the power of self-defense to our government. We didn't delegate them the power to murder someone or the power to steal from us. That would be silly. Why would we do that? We literally fought to get away from that. We shot a bunch of dudes. And this common force is to do only what the individual forces have a natural and lawful right to do, which is to act on their delegated powers faithfully, in consistency with the source of that power and what it was to be used for, which coincidentally is to protect the people, protect their liberties, protect their property, maintain the right of each, and cause justice to reign over us all. What is justice here? The unbiased recognition of the equal rights of every individual. That's first and foremost. Thomas Jefferson says this about unconstitutional edicts. Whenever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. We're not obligated to follow unconstitutional laws. The government passes, the feds pass them all the time, don't they? Sometimes we see them come down in the form of agency policies or agency rules. Anybody got a constitution on them? Article 1, Section 1, what does it say? Joe?
All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives.
Did you say all legislative powers or some?
For sure it says all.
Does it? Does it say the Congress is made up of the Senate and the House and the President?
No.
Oh, what about the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court?
No.
Because we can legislate from the bench, right?
Right.
Right. No, all legislative powers, all lawmaking powers is vested in the Congress. Okay? So when we take a look at things like Roe v. Wade, it was never law. It never could be law.
No.
Congress had 50 years to actually write law, and they didn't. Why? Because we didn't delegate them the power to act on such things. That's why. It's not because the Supreme Court had already made their ruling. There was no law in front of them to discuss. We allowed them to legislate from the bench, contrary to what our Constitution says. So not only do we have a horizontal separation of powers problem between the three branches, but now Roe v. Wade had this problem of vertical separation of powers between the feds and the states. It was wrong 6 ways to Sunday. Unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Supreme Court cannot make law. Yet how many states over the last 50 years have said, hey, thanks for your opinion, but we don't care. Good luck enforcing it. Everybody's scared of the feds. The feds are our employee. What are we concerned about? They're going to withhold federal funds? Good luck. We love your argument. Cut us off. We'll quit sending you ours. 2 can play this game. Maybe 37 can play this game. Now we got their attention, right? Yeah, but Jay, the Supremacy Clause says that federal law is superior to state law. Hold on. Let me see what it says. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. I don't see where it says federal law is superior to state law anywhere. But we hear this argument all the time. What are we going to do if the feds say? Because, and I'm like, we don't have to do anything that the feds say if it violates our Constitution. The laws that are made pursuant to the Constitution, by the way, where are all legislative powers vested? In Congress. So the only laws that can be made pursuant to the Constitution have to be delegated powers that we find in Article 1 of our Constitution because that's where we find the delegated powers of Congress, who has all legislative powers. So if you go to Article 1, Section 8, we'll see 17, 18, if you want to count the necessary and proper clause, delegated powers by which Congress has the authority to write laws. That's it. If they write laws outside of those 17 delegated powers, then those laws aren't made pursuant to the Constitution. And because they're not made pursuant to the Constitution, they're unauthoritative, void, and of no force. It's that simple. Literally that simple. All right, so let's talk about the interaction between these two parties. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the government. So we have to understand this. The first part of interaction here happens on the individual level. We did that in the beginning. This is how we formed our own system of government. If you remember, while we were operating under the Articles of Confederation, we had a group of men from each state show up and draft a new constitution, right? So they did this as a group of individuals. They utilized their God-given rights and force to create a new system of government. And it was instituted among ourselves. So we got to remember this too. Thomas Jefferson is addressing the King of England here, right? And he's jabbing him in the eye with this. Governments are instituted among men, not over them. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. In other words, hey King, you don't have any power to rule over us because you're not any different than I am. The inherent powers that I've received from my Creator are the same that you received.
There's the word just again.
Bingo. See how this starts making sense now when we put things in the proper context? They're just power through the consent of the government. All right, so, by the way, when it says just power, again, we talked about this a few minutes ago, but it's referring back to the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? So we're going to form the system of government amongst ourselves. And the system is going to derive certain powers from those individuals. Obviously, we're going to delegate that. We find the word delegate in the 10th Amendment. Okay? So there's this word deriving, the system is going to derive power, right? And the people are going to consent to some. We're not going to consent to all. We have not delegated all of our power to the state government, nor has state government delegated all of its power to the feds. If it did, why would we need state government? Right? If we're just going to rubber stamp everything that the feds tell us to do, then we may as well just close the doors on the building down there at 23rd and Lincoln and save you guys a lot of money. We'll go home. You don't need us anymore. Oh, wait, maybe I should be quiet here. Yeah, right. Okay, so I think we understand that principle. Now we also got to remember that we're a union. Okay. The agreement that we have in the Constitution is an agreement between the states. It is not an agreement between the states and the federal government. It is an agreement between the states. The federal government is a byproduct of the Constitution. They couldn't be a party to the compact because they didn't exist yet. So they can't be part of the agreement. Make sense? Yeah. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. We do not live in a democracy. No. Our Constitution says so. Those people can stand behind their podiums in D.C. and say, we have to do what we need to do to protect our democracy all day long. I don't care. We don't live in a democracy. We don't want one. Let me tell you what it's like to live in a democracy. Mob rule. So we deal with this all the time. Some of our colleagues will say, hey, on this particular issue, the majority of my constituents don't want me to vote this way on this bill. And I actually had somebody come to me and tell me that. And I said, you mean to tell me that you've talked to over 20,000 people in your own district? What do you mean? I said, well, you said majority. You represent roughly 40,000 people. You're the one throwing math at me, buddy. I'm just trying to figure it out. You telling me you've talked to over 20,000 people? No, I haven't talked to that many. I'm like, well, what are you calling a majority? Well, I got like 50 or 60 emails and a few phone calls. And I said, you were way, way far away from any kind of majority there. I said, by the way, I bet you can't find 20,000 people in your district that know who you are. You're not as popular as you think you are. Okay? I'm not either. But we will never know. We will never know what the majority of our constituents want. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that the opinions don't carry value, because they do. And having support from our constituents on certain pieces of legislation, or opposition on certain pieces of legislation, is vitally important. But make no mistake, my job is not to vote the way the majority of what I think my constituents want me to vote. That's mob rule. The only promise I ever made the people in my district is to support, obey, and defend their constitutions. That's it. The argument of, well, this is the way my district wants me to do this, or this is the way my district wants me to do this, is a violation of the Constitution. Call your representatives, call your senators, voice your opinions, tell them the way the cow chews lettuce sometimes. But we need to understand what the Constitution is. Otherwise, we find ourselves in the same argument of taking from one to give to another. And what we end up doing is asking our representatives to support that movement. I can't do that. So my freshman year, you first met me, the constitutional carry bill was the bill of the year. I mean, that was the first big bill. It was the first one that the governor signed. I was one of our primary authors on that bill. I had several phone calls and several emails from people. Some of them were from my district, telling me not to vote in favor of that bill. Right? Now they're voicing their opinion. They're utilizing the system. I want to get those calls. That's what I'm there for. But I can't violate my oath. And you can ask me to do that all day long, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say, listen, I've got an oath to uphold. And if that isn't good enough, then maybe I'm not your guy. I'm not going to vote to take your rights away. I'm not going to vote to restrict your rights. My job is to secure them. It's pretty simple. So you can tell people in Article 4, Section 4 of our Constitution, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me correct people about this all the time. Like, we don't live in a democracy. Go read this. All right, so more on the interaction here. This is kind of the last stop, if you will, in our declaration, where Thomas Jefferson is saying there are two ways that the people can take control of their government. They can either alter it, and he goes on in the declaration to say we've been unsuccessful in trying to alter it, so the only other option here is to abolish it. I don't know of anybody on our side that's arguing to get away from the Constitution. We're trying to fight to get back to it. Right?
Yes.
That's what we took an oath to support, obey, and defend. Right? Not just in our elected positions, but some of us even in our military positions. And that oath of office has no expiration. So here's how we can interact. We can alter the system of government. Now, we do that all the time. Right? We can make amendments to our Constitution. We can change statutes. Right? We can change the law. And then, of course, if that system does not protect, secure, is a better word here, secure our rights like it's supposed to, then we still retain the power and the right to abolish it altogether, which is what we did a little over 250 years ago now. All right, so we therefore the represent, okay, this is the very end of the Declaration of Independence. This is where we find the word authority. Usually when we talk about authority, there's two parties to this, right? Someone is subservient to the others. Government has no authority over you. You are the authority. Thomas Jefferson is pointing that out here in the Declaration of Independence. This is the closing paragraph, right? In the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies. Declare that these United Colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. And he also talks about comparing every one of these states to the state of Great Britain, from the state of France. These are sovereign entities, small countries, if you will. Still that way today. We talked about securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. This is more on the interaction. Government has a job. And there it is, plain and simple. Like I said, in the 10th Amendment, powers that are not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Do not forget that it is the people that retain all of the powers. Just because you delegated them doesn't mean that you don't have them. Government only acts as your agent. How many small business owners do we have in here? You've got employees, right? Got people that work for you. I'm sure everybody else has had a job at some point, right? So, instead of boss, right? Some of us have multiple jobs. So, as an employer, when you tell your employee to do something, you delegated a certain power to them to go do that. Did you surrender that power? Or did you only delegate? Same thing. We haven't given up any of our powers. We've only delegated them to another entity to act as an agent on our behalf. That's it. So this is one of my favorite quotes of James Madison. It says that in the case of deliberate, palpable, and dangerous exercise of powers not granted by the compact, let's talk about the Constitution. The states and the parties thereto have the right and are in duty bound to interpose for arresting the progress of the evil. So what is he talking about here? I call him Jimmy. We're on a first name basis. The guy that wrote the Constitution. What he's saying here is when the federal government, in this example, acts on powers that were not delegated to them, that is an act of evil. And the responsibility of correcting that falls squarely on the shoulders of your state. 2 years ago when we ran House Bill 1236, I'm sure you guys remember this, I made the argument in our caucus that responsibility falls squarely on the shoulders of our state legislature. Where would I get that idea? In Article 7 and Article 5 of our U.S. Constitution. It took the state legislatures to ratify the Constitution. It takes the state legislatures to amend it. Your state legislatures are the most powerful entity on earth, not just in our country. And those aren't my words, those are Jimmy's words. He says that in another quote. Most powerful entities on the face of the earth. We can change, we're the only entities that can actually change the provisions in the U.S. Constitution. And we do that through the delegated power of the people that they gave their states. It's our job to step in between an overreaching government and our constituents to secure their liberties. It's our job. We're the check on that power that's been delegated. Again, here's the flow of powers, and remember, it only works in one direction. The feds are at the bottom, in the most narrow part of that triangle, because they have the fewest powers to act on. The states have a little bit more, but all of the power is still retained by the people. Sebastien says, can the law, which necessarily requires the use of force, which is something we've delegated, that's why we have law enforcement, right? Can that rationally be used for anything except protecting the rights of everyone? I defy anyone to extend it beyond this purpose without perverting it and consequently turning might against right. If you use the force of law to do anything other than defend everyone's rights, then what you end up doing is stealing from one to take, to give to another. That's the only alternative. Plain and simple. All right, so here's the key takeaways. If there's anything you want to take a picture of today, this is it. Share it with your friends, post it on Facebook, put it out on the tweeters, wherever you feel comfortable doing. But our rights and our powers exist outside of the Constitution. Our rights and powers exist outside of government. Legitimate systems of government are formed among men, not over them. Those truths are true everywhere, not just here. They also secure all unalienable rights, not just some of them. Our unalienable rights are not just life, liberty, and property. That's among these unalienable rights. People delegate powers to government who act as their agent. They do not surrender their powers, they only delegate them. You still have them. Remember, these are like your spiritual gift. You cannot get rid of it. No one can take it from you. You can't give it away. People cannot surrender rights nor powers. When you're having discussions with your friends, feel free to pull these things up, show it to them, and say, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
Well, what procedure do you go about getting this all straightened out?
The first step is for states to recognize what kind of power they actually have. And they're going to have to learn how to protect their own backyard. It's our job to do that. Madison says that now that he crafted the Constitution, right? Which is all about our federal system of government. But he wrote it in such a way that at the time it was understood that the states actually had all the powers. Here's a perfect example. You know, there were 7 churches at the time of ratification, or 7 states that had their own church, had their own state church, state religion, at the time of ratification. And they ratified the Constitution. What does the First Amendment say? Congress shall make no law, right, establishing religion, or, you know, right? So why would the states ratify the Constitution if they knew that this was going to end their state religion or state churches? Why would they do that? They didn't. They didn't, or let me rephrase it, they didn't de-establish those state churches or state religions even after the ratification of the Constitution because it didn't apply to them. That was a restriction against Congress. It was a restriction against the federal government. It took some 50 years for these 7 states to get rid of their state religions. And they de-established it on their own. Didn't have to go to court. Nobody had to sue them. We still have that power today. We can still do that. There's not a restriction on the state for doing that. State, the only reason I bring that up, not that I would want to live in a state that had an established state religion. What I'm getting at here is that the states need to understand what kind of power they actually have. And they need to harness that again. We can't keep the feds off our back until we assert the powers we have. But once we do that, and believe me, it's gonna come down to a fight over money, right? But once we do that, then the problem is either gonna correct itself, or we've got a much larger problem. But as long as states are willing to take a knee and do whatever the feds tell them to do, we'll never get it corrected. That is not a step in the right direction. Good question. So here's how you get a hold of me. Oh, you still trying to shoot this thing?
No, that's all right, go ahead, got it once.
You want me to get it for you?
I got it.
You got it? All right, so here's how you get a hold of me. If you want to call. If you don't want to call me, that's okay too. But don't pass these numbers out to people you don't like. Got a question, yes, sir?
Jay, pick up your AR like you was holding the ball, though. It's something I want to point out.
Let's do it later. Oh, let's get through the material here.
Okay. I want to question you about something.
Anybody else need this? Okay. There's a list of my references. I can show those to you afterwards if you're really interested. I think I've got a couple of books floating around out here somewhere. And that's it.
That's it.
Terry, turn it over to you.
Give him a hand, folks. One thing I want to mention, in 2026, Governor Stitt will be he will finish his last term. He'll be term limited out. I am praying that in the election that year, I can vote for a Governor Steagall. This guy's exactly the man we need in the state house. And he didn't ask me to say that. Is anybody got any questions for Jay? Melvin, of course.
Pick up your AR like you did a while ago and hold it on.
He said he'd do that. He said he'd do that later.
I've got
Joe,
I've
you have
got
a
a
question?
question for you. That's why I'm asking you to.
Well,
No.
You said non-negotiable. God's right, non-negotiable.
That's right.
Or the right win. Now, what right, it shouldn't be a negotiable, what rights give you, or what under God's law give you the right to pass bills legalizing sin? Homosexuality, abortion, take the prayer out of schools, take the Bible out of schools. Now how far do we go before we start exercising our rights from God?
Well, I think the first place we have to address that
It should be non-negotiable.
is at the ballot box. We have a way of addressing those issues at the ballot box.
We try at the ballot box.
And we gotta keep trying, right? I mean, this is part of the process. There's always gonna be laws that we don't like. There's always gonna be policies that we don't like.
But when those laws are being passed on and passed, we're in deep trouble with our Lord, because he's not sitting back with closing his eyes on it. He's watching. And if America allows this to continue, we're in deep trouble. That's why we're having the problems we're having right now, because people sit back, churches.
Okay,
and
this
sit back
question
and
time,
let
not
them-
speech time. Joe's got a
well,
question.
I would say, I've got a lot of things swimming around here. I don't know how long this would be if I start speaking, so if anybody else has got something, please.
Well, what this is question time.
It is kind of a question, but
I'll ask you a question.
I love the presentation. But
And you've seen it before.
bits and pieces, I don't know which one, I've seen this particular one before. If you start talking about asserting our powers and rights as citizens and stuff like that, and anytime we start having those kinds of conversations going from the educational aspect here to what steps we would take, that's when people start getting a little apprehensive and want to take all of their Big Brother listening devices and put them outside. Because the minute you start actually even kicking around ideas of how to take those things, because we've had generations of people come before us that just gave away our rights. How do we get from there, or where we are now, to where we should be?
So let's clear the air. Our previous generations didn't give away any of our rights. Our Creator gave those to us.
Well, you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna redirect the conversation back to what the truth is. The truth is, I have sovereign, non-negotiable rights given to me by my Creator, no matter when I was born, right? So, this, and I don't disagree with where you're getting at, but we have to remember what the truth is. Here's a perfect example. And I've asked it here before, I'll ask it again. What is it that the Second Amendment gives us?
Government has to keep their hands off of our rights.
It doesn't give us anything.
It doesn't give us anything. If we do not understand that our rights do not come from the Constitution, then we can't get over the first level.
Recognize the right is good.
It doesn't even, it's not even recognizing the right. What it is, remember what the Bill of Rights, the entire Bill of Rights are restricted, and declaratory restrictive clauses against the misuse of the powers that are listed in the Constitution. Without the Second Amendment, I'd still have the right to own a firearm. My government doesn't give that to me. I had that, we had that right in this country before the Constitution existed.
That was why they didn't want them to write the Bill of Rights.
They want, well, go back and read the preamble to the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Go read the preamble to the Bill of Rights. I can't emphasize this enough. The reason that the Bill of Rights exists is to place additional declaratory and restrictive clauses against government. That's the only reason the Bill of Rights exists. That is it. They told us that in writing. It's not my words, those are the words in the preamble. So if we have to get over this hurdle that my rights do not come from the Constitution. We have to get over that. If we don't, then what we end up doing is pointing at you to get back to your question here, not that this is the position you're taking. If we don't get over this hurdle, then the only position that we have left is to take a knee to the feds when they come to take our rights or our property away from us. And that's why we're having this discussion, is because we don't want to take the knee. So mentally, we have to get over the idea that they're the ones that rule over us. And you're right. Sometimes it is difficult to get over that hurdle and have these conversations. Because there is a difference between going to the ballot box and doing something else. But that doesn't mean we don't have the power to do something else. And we have to take the position that enough is enough at some point and say, here's the line. Here's the line. I'll let Joe finish his
follow up on that. So the point I was getting at is if we start to assert these rights, you have the authorities that most everyone in here is not going to do anything they shouldn't do. But you do have occasional instances like that pastor that was in front of that Planned Parenthood, and then all of a sudden he has an entire FBI SWAT team at his house to violate his rights. And it would have been within his right to defend himself with force. But they show up in force. I mean, how do you, where do you draw the line? What do you do?
Well, there's a time. So it's hard to wrap all that up into one summary, right? Because all these situations can be different.
Yeah.
So there's not an answer. That's a hypothetical question, right? That will never have an answer. And we can sit here all day and discuss what we're going to do. There's no answer to that. Which is why it's important for us, number one, to elect sheriffs that understand what their role is. It's why it's important for us to elect district attorneys that know what their job is. Okay. It's why it's important for us to understand how vitally important it is for us to send good people down to 23rd and Lincoln so they know what their job is. If you can't protect your own backyard, through these measures, then you don't have a backyard. The feds have another playground. And believe me, it is playing out here, even in Oklahoma. We have federal agents that are acting outside of the law. But in none of these cases was their sheriff actually called. So they didn't even give themselves a chance to be defended. So, you know what, we sit around here and discuss, what are we gonna do when the feds show up and break my door down at 3 o'clock in the morning wearing their ninja suits, right? I'm not advocating for you to go do something to aggravate the feds, to invite them in, unintentionally invite them into your house and thing. I'm saying what we all need to do is have a better understanding of what our rights and our powers are, so that when we go to the ballot box to vote for people, we know who it is that we're getting in these offices. And if they're not the right person, we go find somebody else. Because that's our first line of defense. By the time things get to the doorstep, friends, that's a completely different discussion. Things are out of control.
So it's just educating people.
That's our, even Thomas Jefferson tells us.
I understand, call the sheriff in a situation like that. That's the first step, best step.
Call your sheriff.
Yeah.
I got one more question.
Yeah, time for one more.
If it all comes down to we the people, what's gonna happen? How are we going to solve the lack of true information? How can we elect the right people if we're not getting it?
Well, herein lies the issue with the public, right?
You're not getting it out of the newspapers, you're not getting it out. Where are you gonna get the information?
You're gonna have to talk to these people yourself. You're just gonna have to make.
Everybody? That's not gonna happen.
Well, you're the ones that you're responsible for electing. I mean, that is your responsibility as a voter. It's my responsibility as a voter. I'm not gonna go to the ballot box and vote for someone that I haven't done any research on. That's our
You can
responsibility.
do the research and you're not reading the truth. They're telling you whatever.
Our research is going to talk.
What they want to talk about.
So usually, but you bring up a good question, right? So usually, I'll give this presentation right before an election. This particular one, because the question is, somebody knocks on your door and they want your vote. You have one question to ask them, and it's this: what is the proper role of government? And if they start with, well, just go ahead and close the door, because that's not your person, right? You need to know what the proper role of government is. Sometimes they'll come to you, other times you're gonna have to go to them.
Most people running for office don't even know.
It's like we have a large contingency of people down at 23rd and Lincoln, that don't understand.
Okay.
The people have a responsibility. Right. Your responsibility is, the solution is not in government. The solution is in the people. You're gonna have to spend time, take time to go visit with these folks.
Spread the
And
word.
that's the cost of living in a republic.
Coach, it's 1:45, so we're gonna need to wind up. A couple of more real quick announcements. Number one, the reason I asked Jay to do the first part of this constitutional convoy is I'm gonna make every effort to get him back up to K County as often as I can, and we're gonna go through all 8 sections in order rather than jumping around. So that was the reason we backed up and redid this one, and it's been months, and I don't know about you, but I don't remember everything I hear anymore. Also, one other introduction. Melanie, would you stand up? This is Melanie Coughlin Bellinghausen, and she is one of our candidates for the school board in Tonkawa, Oklahoma. We are going to be having a candidate forum for her and Jara McCann, who is the other candidate, at the Church of Christ in Tonkawa, 300 North Public, and that's on the 27th of March. So that'll be basically a week before the election. And I did this last year, and we had 50 people at the candidate forum. I've got a larger facility this year, and I did the numbers. 414 people voted on that election, so I had 12% of the voters in the room before the election for the forum. So any of you that live in Tonopah that are interested in Tonopah schools, 7 p.m. on the 27th of March, 300 North Public. Did you have anything else you wanted to contribute?
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming, Ken.
Can I make one comment before we break up?
If it's short.
It's short. The vote on legalizing marijuana. I haven't read the entire bill, but buried in that bill, the police cannot stop a vehicle and arrest a person under the influence of marijuana. They have to take them to a hospital, sit there as long as it takes.
Keep it short, come on.
Take a blood test, prove that they're under the influence of marijuana.
They can't just.
Well, yeah, but the goddamn people that are against it or are for it are saying it's gonna take out time from the police. It's not. It's gonna add a huge amount of time to the police. So I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Well, folks, it pays to read a bill before you vote on it. That's probably about 2% of the voters, would be my guess.
Well, that's why they
Is
make
that a
it so
high
long.
estimate? Is that a high estimate,
You don't
Ken?
have time to read those
Probably,
things.
yeah.
But
Thanks for
no,
coming,
folks.
folks. Be the fourth Saturday next month, and the two candidate forums. And March 14th for the mini meeting in Tonopah, we're going to discuss the conservative judicial reform. He's quite a guy.